I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to Willie Geist, Nicole Wallace, and especially Donnie Deutsch, I'm back. There we go. Happy Friday, sports fans. Or as they say across the pond, happy Friday, sports fans. Oh, and cheerio and pip pip. We start our show with a little British flavor in the boot and under the bonnet because of what Donald Trump said about David Cameron during a classic Trump phoner early today on Morning Joe. And in the spirit of such Trump phoners, we brought along our Trump phoner phone booth, just in case the man calls. Mr. Trump, operators are standing by. On a day that's been consumed mostly by coverage of Egypt Air Flight 804, not a lot of political news is breaking through. On any other day, what the presumptive Republican nominee said this morning about the British Prime Minister would be big news, we think. So for context, they have not been the best of friends. Cameron has called Trump's proposal for a temporary ban on Muslims entering the U.S., quote, divisive, stupid, and wrong, end quote. And Trump fired back this week telling GMB, that is, the British version of GMA, that he is not a divisive person and that, quote, I'm not stupid, okay? Which makes Trump's statement about PM Cameron this morning rather interesting.
He came after me a little bit, and by the way, he would like me now to visit 10 Downing Street. They put out that invitation about 2 days ago, so I'll do just fine with David Cameron. I think he's a nice guy. Okay. I'll do just fine, but they've asked me to visit 10 Downing Street, and I might do it.
They put out that statement 2 days ago, according to Trump. But the Prime Minister's office at 10 Downing Street responded this afternoon, saying it is long-standing practice for the British leader to meet with nominees from both American political parties. But because neither Trump nor Clinton is officially the nominee yet, there are, quote, no confirmed dates, end quote, for this meeting. So, Mark, my question to you is, and let's just sort of, there's some room for interpretation here, but what Trump seems to have said was not clearly right or clearly true. Is he courting much danger, you think, by playing a little fast and loose with the facts here?
Clinton campaign certainly thinks so. They raise it all the time with reporters offline. And then John Podesta, the chairman of the campaign, put out a statement just pounding on this notion of not being able to trust him. I think, we have both talked for a long time about the notion of Trump benefiting during the nomination fight when there was international incidents. If there are international incidents, there almost certainly will be. I think it could come a time in the debates or in the fall where if Trump says something that's wrong and is called on it, and national security could be a problem. In the short term, I don't think it is. And I think that people who think insulting in some ways the British Prime Minister is going to be a problem for him with electorate that he wants to put together, I just don't think that's the case.
Well, it may or may not be. I think, I don't think it's a good idea for political candidates to lie or to play fast and loose with the facts. We would like to think that our presidents...
And they should be held accountable when they do.
And correct. There's no question about that. I also think that that at some point, and again, I don't know exactly when that will be, but if world opinion, if world leaders around this great globe of ours start to express a consensus that Donald Trump is unfit for office, I don't know how it'll play with every single voter in America, but it's not good. It's not what you want, especially if you have a chance of actually being the president of the United States.
Let me tell something to the British people. I happen to know, if you guys think Trump's going to win, your leaders are going to start sucking up to him. The Brits do that.
They do. The British can sometimes be a bit. I thought there's a British word for that. It's unctuous.
Yeah. If Trump looked like he's going to win in the fall, Tony Cameron's going to be like his best friend. Oh. It's the. Well,
yeah. I think Trump is calling. Let's wait. Our operator tells us that the Donald wants to say something about former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Go ahead, Donald. You're on the line.
He knows nothing about me. He knows nothing about what I said. I'm not a big fan of his, by the way, because you take a look at two things. Look at where our country is with years of him being involved. We are a mess, number one. I know he has a great reputation and all of that. All of these guys have a great reputation. They've been doing this stuff for 15 years. Look where our country is, okay? We need a new group with better thinking.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Mr. Trump. Appreciate the phone call. A sharp response to Secretary Gates' criticism yesterday of Trump when he expressed some concerns regarding the Republican presumptive nominee's unpredictable foreign policy. So, Mark, does this put an end, my friend, to your oft-expressed, and I always thought rather lunatic fantasy that Mr. Gates could end up being Donald Trump's running mate?
Pretty much. Look, the fact is I've been surprised that Gates, although he's been critical of Trump, he was critical of Hillary Clinton, too.
Yep.
And Donald Trump certainly, there's a chance he'll pick as his running mate someone who he has criticized. But the reason I think it ends it, for the most part at least, is because I think that at this point, they both have staked out. The thing is too close. I don't think there's enough time to patch this up in terms of how they conceive. And Trump said today, in kind of a dismissive way, he didn't care about Gates' credentials.
Right.
He said, yeah, this is a guy who's been part of the foreign policy establishment that's ruined foreign policy. So I think probably I was wrong that was possible.
I think you were pretty much 100%
but I will say this.
Yeah.
I still think someone like Gates is Trump's best bet to pick a running mate who will help him.
Could be true, but here are a bunch of things to think about here. One, Trump was pretty feisty this morning on the phone with Joe and Mika, right? I don't understand why he picked that fight. It makes no sense to me because Gates was not like spoiling for a fight with Trump, and Trump went flew off the handle. Number two, part of the reason you had your fantasy is because you were among some reporters, including me and others, who were told by people in Trump's orbit that Gates might be a good pick. So that actually points to maybe a little dissension in Trump world there, because if they were trying to lead Trump towards Gates, Trump basically slapped back not just Gates here, but slapped back some of his own aides.
I don't waste my time doing much deep stakes reporting at this point in my career, but I will say, from what I just hear, some people are telling me Trump's leaning towards somebody who's not a safe, solid pick where people would look and say, wow, that's a guy or a gal ready to be president.
That would be a mistake.
Other people say, in fact, he's looking at a reckless pick.
Okay, that I'll tell you one thing. I think we both agree about that. Would be a big mistake.
Stand by, phones
are
ringing again.
That would be a big mistake.
It looks like, once again, Donald Trump's trying to reach us. The operator says he's got some more thoughts on Egypt Air Flight 804 and the nexus with U.S. national security.
We cannot continue to let things like this happen. We are being taken advantage of by radical Islamic terrorists, and this world is changing. And another couple of planes go down, Mika, and you're going to have a depression worldwide, the likes of which you've never seen, because nobody's going to travel. There will be no anything. There will be no communication between countries, and you will have a problem the likes of which you've never seen.
Thanks for the call. Let's show our viewers what Trump has been tweeting since early this morning. For example, he dedicated 5 tweets to Hillary Clinton, including this one where he said, quote, crooked Hillary has zero imagination and even less stamina. ISIS, China, Russia, and all would love for her to be president. 4 more years, exclamation point. With sarcasm. But wait, there's more. He tweeted this also. Quote, crooked Hillary looks presidential? I don't think so. 4 more years of Obama and our country will never come back. ISIS laughs, exclamation point. John, is Trump being what Jeb Bush called a chaos candidate to his detriment, or is there an actual cohesive worldview here that could, in fact, help him in a general election against Hillary?
Well, look, there may be a cohesive worldview that he is now propounding, but the problem for him is that the view he's now propounding is at odds with the views that he actually had at the time. People have got to start saying this, right? Trump cannot maintain that he was always a steadfast opponent of going into Iraq. There is documentary evidence that he said to Howard Stern and others that he thought we should invade Iraq. Libya is even more egregious. He made a big deal out of how we had to stop what was going on in Libya, how we had to go into that country. He now claims he was against it the whole time. If Trump wants to say that he was for something before and he's had a change of heart, he's thought it through, now he thinks it was a mistake to invade Iraq or invade Libya or do the Libyan military intervention, that would be fine. You can change your mind. You can't say you were always in one place when in fact there's evidence to suggest that, or not suggest, to prove that you weren't.
On the substance, I'm with you. On the matter of politics and the question of whether this will catch up with him and whether he's got a worldview that can trump hers, she is, unfortunately for her, not the best person equipped to call him on this because of voters' questions about her own reliability and consistency on issues related to national security and to I believe that this could all catch up to him. But I also believe that a lot of the things he's saying are popular with voters.
I agree with that. But the problem here is that he does not have her credentials. She has issues on foreign policy for sure, being part of the Obama administration. That's foreign policy.
Is this an election cycle where credentials matter to voters?
Well, maybe to the few voters who are movable in the middle of the electorate that are going to probably determine the outcome, they very well might be in a dangerous world. They very well might be. It's a case the Clinton campaign is going to make. And all I'll say is, look, that consistency actually does matter. And again, we know we have to call people to account on what they actually said in the past versus what they're saying now. And I will say, finally, I know we've gone over time, but I will say, part of the reason why the Bob Gates thing was always a fantasy is precisely this, is that he doesn't know what Donald Trump's worldview is, and there's not any consistency. He doesn't know what Donald Trump believes, and the things that Donald Trump says he does believe, guys like Bob Gates disagree with. These are all problems. All right. We're hanging up now on Donald Trump, but not in a bad way.
Just kidding.
Coming up, two guests who will be here and not on the phone, but in the flesh, Republican establishmentarians, Alex Castellanos and Pete Wehner, right after this.
Joining us now, two big thinking Republicans, although not exactly in the same way. Strategist Alex Castellanos, who worked for a couple of Bushes, a Dole and a Romney. And live from our D.C. bureau is Pete Wehner, an alum of the Reagan and Bush administrations. He was also the deputy director of speechwriting for George W. Bush. His latest piece for commentary is titled, "Unity Isn't a Trump Card." Alex, right here. Pete, I'm going to start with you in Washington. You say that unity for the sake of the will of the people or for the sake of unity isn't enough. What is the problem with those who are joining Trump for those reasons?
Well, because I think in the end of the day, Mr. Trump is disqualified from being president. Unity is fine, and I understand it. In most situations, it applies in party politics. But the question is unity for what end? Unity for the end of injustice is something that needs to be opposed. Unity for justice needs to be supported. As far as the will of the people, look, in a self-governing country, that usually carries the day. We all understand that. But the founders themselves were deeply worried about the passions of the public. And the will of the public is sometimes wrong. Vox populi is not Vox Dei. The voice of the people is not the voice of God. They've gotten it wrong before. They'll get it wrong again, and they may be getting it wrong right now. So I understand the pull of the unity argument and the pull of the will of the people argument, but it doesn't trump other arguments. At the end of the day, you have to make a decision at what's best for the republic.
And just to be clear, Pete, you're never going to be for Trump. You're never going to be for Clinton. You'll sit this out if those are the choices, right?
I think that's right. I'm certainly not going to vote for Trump under any circumstances. I don't think I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm a conservative. She's a liberal. Right. She stood against practically everything I've been for. Okay. So at this point, okay. I'm probably neutral.
Alex, where are you on Trump being for him or not?
I'm in. I think I love Pete, and I think his arguments are, as always, persuasive. You know, there's one argument that I might add to Pete's next piece, and that is that there's another reason for unity, and that is this country is an airplane headed for the mountain. A lot of people are concerned that we may reach a place from which we cannot return, and that we need someone to change direction now, or there won't be a country that we can restore. So, and I think in one way, those of us in the establishment have been a little disconnected from that sense of urgency that the American people feel. So it's not just about unity for unity's sake. Hey, bring in the turnaround CEO, save the business from bankruptcy, or there won't be a business.
Alex, I won't speak for Pete, but I know one of the things he makes in his article, the piece he wrote, the argument he's making is that if you want to make an argument about Trump versus Clinton on the merits, you can decide Trump's better or Clinton's better, but just the notion of party unity for party unity's sake doesn't make any sense. But here's my question for you. You know, we talked about this all throughout the 2015 Republicans during the Republican nomination fight, and you had deep concerns about Donald Trump's suitability for the office, about whether this guy could be entrusted with the nuclear codes, whether his temperament was suitable for the White House, and you talked about various strategies to take him down. You were not a Trumpista from the beginning. What is it that has changed about Trump that makes him okay with you in that office?
Well, something has changed about Trump, and something has changed about the situation. I lost, right? My other choices didn't make it, and now I have a binary choice, and that choice is to continue in the direction more of the same, which I think is threatening to the country. And, you know, socialism, the extension of socialism in America, I think is deadly. So that's one thing that's changed. The other thing that's changed is I have seen Donald Trump throughout this campaign, and I've seen things that I like. I've seen the family he's raised. And that tells me something, I think, about the man. I think I've seen him, I've talked to business associates. There's a loyalty in the man that I've come to appreciate. And I've seen his loyalty to voters and his respect for voters. You know, when it's easy to throw voters under the bus because they're being politically incorrect, you know, the little people are making too much noise at the dinner party. Right. He doesn't throw the American voter under the bus. Do I still have concerns? Absolutely I do. Do they pale, I think, in comparison to the urgency of the situation, which is something I think Pete should address in his next piece.
So, Pete, let me ask you to address it now. Just, I get where you are on Trump, right? But is abstaining not kind of a cop-out, right? I mean, there is a binary choice here. So for conservatives like you or like Jeb Bush who decide, you know, I'm not under any moral obligation to vote. I can't pull the lever for Clinton. I think Trump is disqualified. How are you going to feel if you wake up on Election Day and Donald Trump, who you say is unfit for office, is sitting there in the Oval Office when you abstained and in part allowed that to happen?
Right, it's a fair question, and I haven't gotten to the final decision yet. I'm just saying I'm not going to vote for Trump under any circumstances. What I'm saying is that I really do think that Hillary Clinton is very problematic. I don't think Alex and I disagree on Hillary Clinton and her demerits, her faults, her vices. Where we disagree is on Mr. Trump. He's right, the situation changed. I think he's wrong. I don't think Donald Trump has changed. There's nothing about Mr. Trump in terms of his attitude, his pronouncements, his actions that is any different than it's been before. In fact, he himself has said he's not going to change. And he used the analogy of the mountain. I agree we're in trouble, and I think we do need to change the direction. The problem is that with Trump guiding the airplane, we're going to hit that mountain sooner and faster and harder than we would otherwise do it. I just want to say one thing on Trump, because I've been in a lot of debates with people. Obviously, I'm in a minority in my party on this. I think the difference here, the kind of inflection point, if you will, on Trump is the judgment about his temperament, his sensibilities, his prudence, his judgment. And I just think he's not only worse than Hillary Clinton, he is in a category all his own. He is worse than anything I've ever seen. I think he's crude. I think he's cruel. I think he has a personality disorder. He's narcissistic. And I think he is dangerous. I really believe if he were president, he is erratic and he would be a danger to the Republic. And he's certainly a danger to the Republican Party. Everything that Alex, and I like Alex and respect him, but that he has fought for and I have fought for is being washed away. This movement, Trumpism, is not conservatism. Now, I don't think that the argument is dispositive as it comes to the Republican Party, because I think the country is more important. But I think on both of those things, that is the Republic and the Republican Party, I think Donald Trump is a real and present threat.
I would add one thing, too, though. If we think the country is in revolt now and has turned to the choices it has now, wait 8 years. If we continue to go in the same direction, 8 years of stagnation, the world seems to be setting itself on fire or dissolving in front of our eyes. Think what the choices that America might make then. So I think there's some urgency to the moment right now.
Pete, I know you don't like Trump. I know you're not going to vote for Trump, but is there somebody you would recommend he pick as his running mate who would make you feel better in case he did win?
You know, I really haven't given it much thought, because no, it wouldn't make me feel better, because he's obviously going to go in his own direction, his own way. Look, there are a number of people out there that are impressive and good, probably would help him. But at the end of the day, as you know, these decisions are almost always made by the top of the ticket. I guess Kennedy and Johnson in '60 was the last one where the vice president played a difference. And I'm not under any illusions that a vice president is going to mitigate the worst tendencies of Donald Trump, so it doesn't really matter to me.
All right, Pete, it sounded to my ears at least once like you might vote for Hillary Clinton, but we won't make you say that today.
I would tell you if that were where I'm being completely candid right now. I'm saying no, but given where Trump is going, it's possible I can be persuaded. Okay,
Pete Wehner in Washington. Pete, thank you so much. Alex, thank you. We're going to be right back with a Romney-Ryan Policy Director, Lanhee Chen, right after this.
Alex, too. We're back with our friend, Republican super consultant, strategist, thinker, Alex Castellanos, and now joining us is the Romney 2012 alum, policy maven, Lanhee Chen. Lanhee, I want to ask you this question that we were talking about in the first block of the show. Do you detect in Donald Trump, on his the penumbra of his policy pronouncements on foreign policy, do you see a real worldview?
Well, I think it is a real worldview in his eyes. You know, I think he sees it as this sort of America first frame. But that's not real helpful in terms of determining when America intervenes, where it intervenes, how it intervenes, or maybe the answer he has is it doesn't intervene. I don't know. It's just, I think he thinks it's coherent. His supporters think it's coherent, but I'm not sure from a policy worldview if it actually is.
Hillary Clinton is taking out a more aggressive pro-gun control position than any nominee of either party ever has. Do you think the politics of that has shifted so that Trump is making a mistake, so embracing the NRA whose endorsement he took today?
I don't think so, in part because, remember, he's got a problem with conservatives, too. And so by doing what he did today, he's trying to signal them, look, you can trust me on these key issues that the conservative movement cares about. But at the end of the day, the politics of gun control are really tricky. And in the states where this election is going to be fought, I'm not so sure it's a bad move.
Let me ask you this question that we just asked Pete. Now that you're on Team Trump, who would you like to see him pick as a running mate that you think would make him solider and it would do him good both politically and substantively as a running mate?
Ronald Reagan would be great with me. I'd be happy with that.
Okay.
Barring
not
that,
available currently.
Not available,
yeah.
But no, if they're, I hear Newt Gingrich's name out there a bit. Be very comfortable with that. Whom else is out there that, a bunch of good Republican governors. I'd be great with Kasich. There's another good, solid Republican choice, experience on the Hill. Governor Mary Fallin, somebody who's had experience on the Hill as well, good record as governing. So I think there's some choices out there that, the VP is not going to change, transform the campaign. I think you're right, Lanhee, that it might solidify the base a little bit, but it's not going to ultimately. Trump is too big to be defined by a VP.
What do you wonder about Trump right now? What are your sort of things you wonder about?
I wonder a lot of things about Trump, but I think, one thing that a lot of people have said, and I think it's true, is that Trump transcends the normal requirements for candidates, right? So one of those things would be telling us what it is you might actually do when you're elected. So he said, in some level of non-detail, we're going to build a wall and we're going to get tough on China. But he doesn't have a policy platform in the traditional way that candidates have been required to have them. And so is he going to be able to get away with that?
Do you know anybody? You know a lot of Republican policy mavens, being one yourself. Do you literally know a single person who's in the Trump camp advising him on policy?
No, at this point I don't. There have been some names bandied about, folks that have, maybe taken meetings with him or provided their thoughts, but in terms of formally advising, no, I don't.
What does that mean for people like you who thought policy was such an important part of winning a nomination and being a strong candidate?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, presidential candidates are agenda setters. That's what they do. They are the ones that are out there saying, this is what our country should care about for the next 4 and 8 years. And so him not articulating a vision or really kind of a specific set of policies, I think is very dangerous for the country and the party.
Lanhee worked for Governor Romney. You worked for Governor Romney. Today, Eric Erickson said Mitt Romney should run as a third-party candidate. If Mitt Romney ran, would you be for him?
No.
Why?
Because right now it would divide. It would elect Hillary Clinton, which again the airplane hits the mountain, and I think that's the most dangerous thing a Republican could do.
All right, Alex Castellanos, Lanhee Chen, thank you both. When we come back, a new poll, the NRA, and a triple threat of reporters. Right after this.
With us now, a sparkling trifecta of our political journalist colleagues. Kelly O'Donnell of NBC News is out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Bernie Sanders is holding a rally at Santa Fe Community College. From Bloomberg Politics, Sahil Kapoor coming to us from our D.C. bureau, and Reed John is here in the studio with us. Big poll out overnight and this morning from CBS News, New York Times, on all sorts of things related to the presidential race. One number, the horse race number, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. One of those mythical matchups. Clinton with a 47-41 lead. That is narrower than that poll had it, and some other polls have had it, but still a little bit outside the margin of error. Also, same poll, national favorability numbers. Trump, 21% favorable with women, and people have focused much on that. But Bill Clinton's unfavorable with men. Sorry, Hillary Clinton's unfavorable with men, 26%. So not much different there, each with their gender problems with the opposite gender. And then one more number from this poll. Is the candidate honest and trustworthy? Neither Clinton or Trump fare very well. They both get about a little under a third of voters saying that they are honest and trustworthy. So that is the context for the matchup Arit, start with you and talk about Hillary Clinton and the matchup. Where do you think she stands now and Donald Trump? Is this a toss-up, or does she have still the kind of advantage we assume the Democrat would have?
I mean, I think for now she has the advantage, but the danger is what happens in the next couple of weeks with Bernie Sanders and his supporters. Like, especially in a lot of these swing states, she's going to need him and his supporters to help her in Pennsylvania, in Ohio. And the question is, how does she gain their trust and show them that this move to the left is legitimate and not just to win the primary?
Sahil, let me ask you this question. One of the big story that's been playing out today has been this NRA, the back and forth on gun control. Just walk us through what you think the politics of that are. Mark mentioned before, Hillary Clinton further to the left on gun control than any Democratic nominee
openly
in our lifetime, further openly, brave, proudly. Donald Trump going down, someone who was previously suspect in the eyes of a lot of gun rights advocates, now getting the endorsement, not surprisingly from the NRA, given the choice. But just lay out the politics of that.
John, I think the contrast we're seeing between Democrats and Republicans in this election on gun rights is the staunchest we've seen, at least in a generation, probably more so than when Bill Clinton ran, but at least as much as any candidate since then. Clinton has run, as you mentioned, pretty far to the left on gun control. She's taken a very staunch and strong stance on it. Part of this is to get ahead of Bernie Sanders, given that guns was pretty much the one issue where, she could claim stronger progressive credentials than him. But Donald Trump, as Republicans have for a very long time, is campaigning in lockstep with the staunch gun rights agenda, the NRA agenda, things like a national right to carry. So I think we're going to see this issue play for the first time in a long time. Previous nominees like John Kerry, even Barack Obama in both his campaigns barely made a peep about gun control. Hillary Clinton is dialing up the volume, and I think she senses that the ground has shifted since Sandy Hook and since the fact that shootings across the country have become more and more regular.
It seems to me, Arit, that on the gun control thing, that Clinton has been happy to obviously take that position, given where Sanders is. That Sanders is perceived as being out of step with the Democratic base on the gun issue, and the Sanders campaign was frustrated about never really being able to counter that throughout this nomination fight. But do you think that puts her in a good position relative to the general election electorate to be where she is now?
I think it helps her a lot with her base, like minorities and women especially, like women losing their kids, like minorities, you see gun violence in low-income communities. Like, those are the people who really care about guns, and those are the people who are backing Hillary Clinton. So for her to come out strong on this in this primary, like, that's helped her a lot. Like, I saw her in Hartford, Connecticut, and she just came across so human when she was talking to a mother who'd lost her child at Newtown, a guy who was involved in a gang and got out of it. And just seeing her talking to people about it in a really human way, like, that has helped her a lot, I think.
Totally agree. I think some of her best moments in the whole campaign is when she showed humanity, talking about this issue where her heart is. I think every candidate benefits when they talk about something they actually believe in with passion and emotion. This is the issue on which I think she's as passionate as anything else, really. So let me ask you about judges. Donald Trump kind of issued a challenge to Hillary Clinton today, said she should put out her own list of judges and potential justices the way he did. That seemed to me to be pretty shrewd politics, maybe even beyond base politics, but more maybe even reaching towards the center, since Republicans have done pretty well talking about these issues in the past few years.
Right, these issues are base mobilizers. I mean, I think as a political matter, Donald Trump certainly helped himself by putting out this list, because one of the big doubts about him is he going to pick a conservative justice to replace Justice Scalia if he is president? That's one thing that the conservative legal community and the Republican base in general is very, very attuned to. Now, I've asked the Hillary Clinton campaign if they intend to put out a similar list. I have not received any indication that she will, and I sort of doubt that she will. But, the Supreme Court, again, if you were to rank issues that are going to be consequential and important this election, the Supreme Court ranks as high as anything else I could imagine, not only because of the fact that the next president will likely choose the successor to Justice Scalia, but because 3 justices that are still sitting on the bench right now are going to be 78 years old, 80, and 83 years old as of Election Day. So it's very likely that the next president could appoint several justices, as many as 4 justices, if they're a 2-term president.
We're going to talk a lot about the Democratic dynamics in the next block, but I want to ask you this question. Trump is now doing these two things simultaneously about Bernie Sanders. One, he calls him Crazy Bernie and says, crazy Bernie, crazy Bernie, crazy Bernie. And then he says all the Sanders voters, or a lot of them, are going to come to him. And then he says he thinks Sanders should run as a third-party candidate, which is sort of funny because a lot of them were going to come to him. He wouldn't want Sanders to stay in the race. What's going on there? What is Trump? Is that just inconsistent and crazy? Or again, is there some method to the Trump madness in terms of how he talks about Bernie Sanders?
I think he's trying to play all the cards at once and see which one actually hits.
Go fish, Yahtzee, hearts.
There's all sorts
Blackjack.
There's all sorts of options of how Sanders' role now and in the future could help his cause, and I think he's waiting to typical Trump thing. He just maybe different metaphors, throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
You spend a huge amount of time
argument, no matter if they contradict each other.
Yeah.
You spend a huge amount of time with Sanders. Like when you talk to Sanders people, all those people who are at Bernie Sanders rallies, do you meet a lot of Sanders people who you think if Sanders isn't the nominee, they're going to think about voting for Donald Trump?
No. Now, I think every once in a while, you'll find like someone who was a Republican in 2008 and now they like Bernie Sanders. But as far as like people who are sort of on the fence, I mean, maybe in like West Virginia or Kentucky, but I think most Sanders supporters are, I guess I'll vote for Hillary, or I don't know what'll happen, or I'm going to write his name in. They're just diehard liberals.
Yeah.
They're not. Like, Trump is like anathema to them.
The ones who want to tear the system down don't seem to be wanting to build a new system around Donald Trump. They want to build a new system around socialism.
Yeah, it's inconvenient for them that the alternative to Hillary is Donald Trump.
Right. All right, everybody stand by. We're going to take a quick break, come back. Kelly O'Donnell will join us in just a minute. And don't forget, if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can also listen to this program live on the radio on Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
We're back with Sahil Kapoor and Arid John, and we also finally have Kelly O'Donnell dialed in. Before we get to her, Sahil has a story up on BloombergPolitics.com now, where he writes that while Sanders seems defiant on the stump, behind the scenes he's assuring Democratic leaders that he's all in for uniting the party and stopping a Donald Trump presidency in the general election. Before I talk to Sahil about that, or before we do, I want to ask Kelly O'Donnell, who was at a Sanders rally in New Mexico. Kelly, set the scene out there. What's going on? How does Bernie Sanders seem?
Well, it really helps a candidate to have had one down day in Palm Springs. A down day is a term of art in campaign world about having no public events, but plenty of behind-the-scenes conference calls and work. He did that yesterday, and today Bernie Sanders is here at Santa Fe Community College, and he seems a bit refreshed, but is not hitting Hillary Clinton as hard as we have seen in recent days, going after Donald Trump and making his case that we see city by city, and we see that he is trying to really push voters to remain energized as we get to the farthest end of this primary season, not ceding any ground. So today the campaign also announced that it raised just about $27 million in April, saying that tops what Hillary Clinton was able to raise for the fourth month in a row. So while there are others who are doing the campaign math, saying this is really winding down for Sanders, he is not willing to give that up. And in a place like New Mexico, California to come, he is talking about adding to his 20 wins and hopes to have voters here be energized. So he's got a lot of stops. And, of course, adding to the color of a Sanders event before he took the stage, back behind the scenes, talking to local media, meeting people in private, there was Native American music here, adding to sort of the cultural aspects of the campaign trail. So as we're measuring words, guys, I would say that he is not as harshly going after Hillary Clinton today, but this is his first event of the day, and more to come.
Sahil, that sort of jibes with your piece in a way. So talk about that a little bit. You've been talking to Democratic senators who've been having private discussions, semi-private discussions with Senator Sanders about whether he wants to burn the House down or whether he wants to try to make peace eventually. Tell us about that.
Right. So, John, it's a very revealing contrast because in public we've seen in the last few weeks Bernie Sanders, even as his path to the nomination narrows almost to being shut completely, he has taken a pretty defiant attitude. He continues to go after Hillary Clinton and pretty strong terms. He continues to paint the Democratic Party as fundamentally sort of broken and needing major, profound reforms to get right again. But behind the scenes, he's doing a lot to quell the sort of hand-wringing and the tensions among Democrats that his keeping on this way would hurt them in the fall and would play into Donald Trump's hands. In the last week, he's called Barbara Boxer after some of the chaos in Nevada when she was the target as the keynote speaker of some of his supporters. He's also called Dick Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. And Senator Durbin told me that he came away from the conversation absolutely convinced, not a doubt in his mind, that Bernie Sanders will ultimately fight for the team, fight for the Democrats in the fall to defeat Donald Trump. So it reveals to me, or it suggests to me, that on some level, Bernie Sanders is playing a game of leverage here. He wants to go to the convention, having picked up as many votes as possible, having as many delegates to influence the Democratic Party platform, to influence Hillary Clinton's general election campaign. And he's using the arguments, he's making the arguments that he has to make to keep his supporters energized, as Kelly was just discussing, and to get every vote that he possibly can between now and July in Philadelphia. So it seems to me that that's what his game is. Again, it's difficult to know. He hasn't been very very clear, straightforward about what exactly his strategy and end game is, but the pieces are starting to come together.
So also in the CBS New York Times poll, they asked Sanders supporters, will you vote for Clinton? 72% said they would, but that means 28% say they won't. 8 years ago, only 60% of Clinton supporters said they'd vote for President Obama. So
at the same time,
8 years ago. So my question to you is, because you've talked to a lot of Sanders supporters, if and when he comes out and says, I want everyone who supports me to vote for Hillary Clinton, is he going to be able to raise that number? Will more than 72% of his supporters follow his wishes if he says, as Hillary Clinton did 8 years ago, vote for the person who beat me?
I think that, like he says, it depends a little bit on Hillary Clinton. If Sanders supporters get the sense that she is not committed to these more to the left changes that she's made, then they're going to stay home, or they're going to.
But if he says they are, if he says Hillary Clinton is progressive and she's a champion, will that be good enough, or do you think they'll reach their own independent judgments?
I mean, no, I don't think. I think that. I mean, the problem for Sanders is that just because he says, oh, everything is fine, like he didn't tell people, supporters in Nevada, to yell and shout, but he did say, like, his campaign has put out this idea that there's been some disenfranchisement, there's been some unfairness. Like in New York, voters were purged. In Arizona, the lines were long. So people see that and they go the extra step. So just because Sanders says you guys should vote for Hillary Clinton, I think there's also this sense like they need to be convinced from her.
I agree with you.
All right, Reed John, Kelly O'Donnell, Sahil Kapoor, thank you for all of your time and wisdom. Have a happy Friday and a good weekend. Up next, AOL co-founder Steve Case on his new book, The Third Wave, an entrepreneur's vision of the future, right here after this.
Welcome. You've got guests. Or really, we've got a guest. It's AOL co-founder, current chairman and CEO of the investment firm Revolution, and a big thinker about pretty much everything, Steve Case. He's got a new book out. It's called The Third Wave, an entrepreneur's vision of the future. And Steve Case joins us from the Washington Bureau, New York Times bestseller. Congratulations. This is the kind the kind of book that lots of people interested in lots of different stuff are interested in. But it's really about where the world is, where the country is. And of course, the title, The Third Wave, begs the question. Just set the table a little bit for us. What was the first wave? What was the second wave? And now what is this third wave?
Well, the first wave was really focused on the internet. So the first wave was just building the internet, getting everybody connected to the internet. When we started, only 3% of people were online 30 years ago. Now, of course, everybody's online. The second wave, in the last 15 years or so, building apps and services on top of the internet. So it's Facebook, it's Google, it's Twitter. And the third wave is really integrating the internet more seamlessly throughout our lives, throughout our society. Things like energy and transportation, food, healthcare, education. But the reason I wrote the book, it's going to require a different mindset, sort of a different playbook, what I call the 3 Ps, people, partnerships, policy, to really be effective.
So, Steve, let me ask you a question, just like get this into the realm of politics here. I have 2 questions that are related. One, Donald Trump is a businessman by every metric, right? When you look at Donald Trump as a businessman yourself, as an entrepreneur, do you see a kindred spirit in Donald Trump? Is there a character there that you recognize and feel a kinship with?
Sure, at one level, because he's got that business entrepreneurial kind of background. But as you know, I kind of stay out of the politics side of things. I focus on trying to bring people together on policy, particularly around innovation and entrepreneurship. And frankly, I wish this election there had been more focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, economic growth, and job growth. We counted all the debates in the last year or so. There's 600 or 700 questions. Less than a half dozen were on these core issues of innovation, entrepreneurship, and that's a big theme of the book. I think we really need to make sure we remain the most innovative entrepreneurial nation, irrespective of who ends up being the next president or who controls the Congress.
Right. I'm not trying to drag you into the realm of politics where you don't want to go. I guess, this is my related second question.
Sure you are. Sure you are.
Well, my related second question is, these are two human beings running for president, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. As an entrepreneur who wants to create a policy, a climate that's favorable to entrepreneurship, right? When you look at the two of them and what they have said so far in this campaign, how do you evaluate them, relatively speaking? Not saying who you endorse or anything, but how do you evaluate what they've said about these topics on policy that matter from an entrepreneur's point of view?
They haven't said that much on these issues. Again, on both sides. It has not really been a big focus of the campaigns and has not been a focus of the debates. Hopefully that will change in the months to come, because I remind people, particularly here in D.C., that 250 years ago, America itself was a startup. It was just an idea. And the reason we lead the way is because of the work of entrepreneurs, first in the agricultural revolution, then the industrial revolution, more recently this technology revolution. So we need to get the focus more on these issues of what does it take to remain the most innovative entrepreneurial nation. There's a lot of things around regulation, a lot of things around immigration, a lot of things around investment incentives, things I talk about in the book. We need more focus on that.
Steve, one of the reasons people are so attracted to the book and so excited about it, it does have a vision for the future. But I want to ask you about the present. In these third wave realms, you mentioned some healthcare, food, energy, et cetera. What's a current example of something that's kind of foreshadowing the future, where the internet is playing a big role, either in a specific industry or a state or a project, where you'd say that's what things are going to look like more and more down the road?
Well, something is happening right now in some schools, but not most schools, are more personalized, adaptive approaches to learning. Places like New Orleans, they reinvented their school system over the last decade. There's a lot of innovation, what's called education technology or ed tech in places like New Orleans. Another is there's a lot of interest in the area of smart cities. Now, things like autonomous cars are part of that, but some big companies like IBM and GE are focused on that. A lot of startups are focused on how do we move around cities. More and more people are living in cities. How do we manage those cities in a smarter way? That's going to be another big theme. So it really cuts across all sectors of the economy. Healthcare is 1/6 of our economy, and there's a lot of work now in terms of keeping people healthier, dealing with chronic disease, being more precise about diagnosis for life-threatening diseases. So this third wave is going to really cut across some really important aspects of our lives, not just about the technology. This is where the internet kind of meets the real world.
Let me ask you, Steve, about, it's often said that most of the innovation that's going on in government is going on at the state and city level, right? So are there places that you can point to across the country where there have been innovations in how government works, and particularly in innovations that create a better climate for innovation, that could be adapted to the federal government easily?
Sure. And first of all, I should say one positive thing on the federal government is 4 years ago, the Congress passed in a bipartisan way the Jobs Act, jumpstarting our Business Startups Act with the work of the White House and the Congress. And that actually, one provision around crowdfunding went into effect this week. So now entrepreneurs all across the country can use the internet to raise money for their company. I think it could be a game changer for people not in Silicon Valley or New York, but other parts of the country. But in terms of specific places, last week I was in Colorado. The governor there, we spent some time with some of the entrepreneurs. There's the unemployment there is under 3%. There's lots of cranes in Denver building new buildings, and they figured out a good way to work together, the government and the private sector working together. I think we'll need more of that in this third wave. I think the innovators will need to talk to the policymakers, whether it be at more the local level or the federal level, if we're going to really remain the leader as we move into the third wave.
Steve, I'm obsessed with taking the GDP from 2% to 3.5%. I think it's the biggest challenge.
We need to do that.
What's holding us back?
A lot of things are holding us back, but the most important one is we need to focus more on entrepreneurs everywhere. Right now, last year, 75% of venture capital went to California, New York, and Massachusetts. 75%. The other 47 states fought over the other 25%, and about 90% of that went to men. About 1% went to people of color. So we need to level the playing field across the country and make sure everybody with an idea has a chance. The reason that's so important is if you look at the data from like the Kauffman Foundation, all the job growth comes from these young startups, not from the small businesses, not from the big businesses, from the young, fast-growing startups. If you want to really drive economic growth or drive job growth, you've got to focus on the startups, but not just in a few places, everywhere all across the country.
Steve Case, congratulations again. Best-selling book, The Third Wave, available now at your finer bookstores. You can even buy it on the internet, I'm told.
Steve's the new Alvin Toffler.
Yeah. Again, Third Wave, an entrepreneur's vision of the future. Steve Case, thank you. Congratulations, and we'll be right back.
You can watch us anytime on BloombergPolitics.com or head there now to listen to the latest installment of The Culture Caucus, which is my podcast with the great Will Leach. This week we talk about the new documentary Wehner, which documents, as documentarians do, his doomstruck 2013 campaign for mayor here in New York in eye-popping, cringe-inducing detail. We also speak to that campaign's communications director, Barbara Morgan. Coming up on Bloomberg West, Emily Chang will be speaking to Instacart's CEO about online food delivery.
Food.
Mark, you like the idea of food. I know you do, and I do too. So until Monday, from us, I'm back. He's still here. We'll see you on Monday. Sayonara.